Good evening. Welcome to Friday Night with Friends, everyone. It's so wonderful to be back here yet again tonight on this Friday. A gorgeous day, a bit windy. So hold on to your hats if you're listening to us outside, or you probably won't be able to hear us if it's the wind coming through your headphones. But we are happy to have everyone on tonight. Thank you for joining us and giving us your time. We want to welcome our first-time listeners tonight. If you're on, welcome. Friday Night with Friends is just a casual chit-chat with some of our friends, literally, and we get to hear a part of their story in life. We've gone several different topics, different guests on over the past year and a half. And so tonight you'll hear what our guest is going to be speaking about. We have Chelsey Bayles on with us tonight, and she is a licensed counselor. And I'm going to get to her bio in just a second here, but I want to welcome everybody to learn more about our church, Newark United Pentecostal Church, and what we do, what we're all about, and our digital campus. Visit us on newarkupc.info. There's information there on how to join small groups. We do them virtually. We do them twice a month. And if you'd like to join one, you can find out how to do that there. We also have information on how you can submit prayer requests and partner with us in giving. Among other information, also the things we're doing in our Kids Hub to keep our kids connected and learning about the Lord and Scripture and continuing to be together in this time over screens. So I will delay us no longer. You can see the lovely Chelsey on with us today, and I'm going to share with you what she has shared with us about herself, and then I'll hand it over to her. So Chelsey Bayles is a licensed professional counselor of mental health, certified advanced alcohol and drug counselor, and minister with the UPCI. She also currently serves as the care pastor with Word of Life Fellowship in Chaddsford, Pennsylvania. She's currently starting a telehealth practice in the state of Delaware in partnership with New Beginnings Therapeutic Services and accepting new clients ages 18 and older. Chelsey is married, and her husband, Jordan, currently live in Wilmington, Delaware with their two pups. Oh, I want to know what kind they are.
I have a corgi, a Pembroke corgi, and we just got a yellow lab 2 weeks ago.
Oh, wow. Are they getting along?
They are getting there. They're getting there.
Oh, goodness. Maybe we should. I kind of wonder about the therapy world and animals, but I didn't ask you on for that tonight, so I'm not going to blindside you with those questions. But she enjoys working on home projects with her husband, spending time outdoors, hiking, spending days by the water, and playing music with her church family. So in the comments below, Erica, our tech person, thank you for being on with us tonight. If you want to put in her email here, she says feel free to contact her at cbayles, her last name, at nbtherapeuticservices.com. And I know Erica is familiar with that. She used that email earlier this week to contact you with. So she says, feel free to contact her with any questions, consultations, or additional requests. So that is the professional side and career side, mostly married life also, of Chelsey. But I know that our relationship with her as a church body, Newark United Pentecostal Church, long before me, her parents, I believe, met and were married by the elder Beardsleys, James Beardsley, because I remember when your sister got married, Elder Beardsley, married her as well. And I remember hearing that he had married your parents. Yeah. So long-standing relationship there. Her mom and dad were the first daughter work from Newark United Pentecostal Church, and of course have been years now autonomous as the Word of Life Fellowship, where you currently and your husband currently serve in ministry. Yes. So long-standing relationship. They are definitely more Friday night with family, but it's Friday night with our family and friends. And so it's lovely to have you on. And hello to your mom and dad and your sister and her family as well. But we'd love to hear from you. So go ahead and greet us. And then we'll go ahead with Chelsey and I had talked about some questions earlier a couple weeks ago, actually. And she's going to be coming on specifically talking about her career as a counselor, her experience in that, and what she's currently ventured into, which we're really excited about for her. So welcome, Chelsey.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on your Friday night broadcast with friends. I know you guys do a lot of these different broadcasts, so it's exciting to even be invited. I'm honored and humbled, so thank you. I should do a plug. In my bio, I had said I work with people 18 and older, but as of today, I'm now working with 16 and older. So I am I pivoted a little bit, so I am starting to work with older adolescents as well. So
that's excellent.
Yeah, so before that leaves my mind, I wanted to make sure I gave that updated information. But yes, I am excited to be here, excited to share about my new endeavor, and just to get to see what everything that Newark UPC has been up to. I see it come up on my Facebook or my husband's Facebook. I don't have Facebook, but we're all connected, and it's great to see everything you guys have been doing to get the mission out there and communicate in this new and unprecedented time.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the digital campus has been a learning curve for all of us, but in the end, I think we're all kind of enjoying it. We're eager to get back in person services, but it has definitely been a blessing, I think, to many of us. So thank you for that. We are going to get to Chelsey has started a practice here in Delaware. And before we get to that, because that's part of why we wanted to have you on tonight, was to give you a chance to talk about that. We did talk a little bit about how, you're still so young. I don't actually know how old you are, but I know you're young.
I'm 28.
Okay, there, I knew.
Yeah.
And so, reading about your accomplishments and hearing, what you're involved in and what you've done so far, postgraduate, school and education, you've had your experience in counseling. And so tell us about this journey. You're only 28, but lots of experience in education behind you. So what led you into counseling?
Yeah. I think people are always surprised when I say that I'm 28 when they see, the bio or the resume. But I went to undergrad at Eastern University, which is a small Christian liberal arts college outside Philadelphia. It's actually where my sister went as well. And I have an undergrad in psychology and a minor in Spanish. So I think I always knew I wanted to be a counselor. So when I went in, I actually went in either deciding between music therapy and psychology, ended up going with psychology. But for as long as I can remember, I've wanted to be someone that helps people. Now, whether that comes from being a PK and raised in the church and seeing my parents pour into other people for so long, I've just always felt that was my calling, and that was the burden that God had given me very, very specifically. I always joke that even as a kid, Eeyore was my favorite Disney character because he was so sad, and I felt like somebody needed to sit with him and talk about how he could cope effectively. And I had this Eeyore stuffed animal. My parents always joke about it because I was bound and determined that Eeyore was not going to be depressed anymore. He was going to be free in Christ. I was going to help him. But so I think I believe God just gave me that burden and that calling from a very young age. I've always been very aware of mental health and the struggles that people face both in the world and then in the church. And I just kind of followed that path. So I did my undergrad at Eastern University, and I did an internship in Europe working with a humanitarian effort with women rescued out of human trafficking for a brief month in the summer. And then I came back and went to grad school at WilMU and have a master's in mental health counseling with a specialization in treating trauma in kids, but I've actually pivoted more towards adults at this point. So everything I don't know, it just always kind of lined up. And, I think a lot of people go into college wondering what they're supposed to do. I went into college knowing what the plan was and what I wanted
Mhm.
to do, and I set my sights on it and I just went after it. By the grace of God, not that there hasn't been hurdles, there absolutely has, but resilience is a big factor there, and just keep on moving.
Oh, yes. That's, uh, I think like you said, it's kind of a gift to have had an idea of what you wanted to do in pursuing education, and not only that, but you stuck with it. Because
Yeah,
sometimes you go in knowing, and then it changes,
and then it changes.
which is okay too. But yes, very clear. It sounds like from the get go for you, and things fell into place. So you had mentioned that your area of specialty is trauma. Also, you're licensed in the field of addictions and substance abuse. So how did that specialty, aside from the Eeyore inspiration, which is adorable, how did that specialty come about?
So in grad school, they have you pick a different specialty, and at that point, I really felt like I wanted to work with kids. And I was doing internships with kids and doing grief therapy and things of that nature. And then one of my internships didn't work out. I wasn't getting enough hours, so I ended up having to go to a
Mm.
rehab facility, and I was driving easily an hour and 40 minutes one way. Let me tell you, if you're considering grad school, it is not for the faint of heart. Let me say that. I don't think I slept for 3 years straight, but I was working and doing two internships, and one of them was at a rehab facility. And I fell in love with those who were struggling and fighting against addiction. I just fell in love with that population. And I became very, very passionate about it. So, really, what my focus is, and there's a lot of terms, right, in the mental health industry, but is co occurring. Basically, which means is that I am cross trained in both co occurring and in addictions counseling. So, I look at how all of those things tied together so that we can overcome both. Because most of the time, when you struggle with an addiction, you usually have some sort of mental health underlying component, whether that be trauma or something untreated or a medical or something of that nature. So I have both of those licenses and both of those credentials because I believe that if we're going to head towards freedom, let's not conquer it all. Let's deal with everything and get to the other side. So that tends to be my approach there.
Oh, right. That's very interesting. We've had, I know when we talked over the phone, I told you we've had a handful of counselors on. In fact, our very first Friday Night with Friends was with Dr. Cindy Miller.
Oh,
And so that was right, fresh when COVID was, I mean, there's still so much unknown, but that's when things were really unknown. And she was on. But since then, and over the past year, a little over a year now, we've had our digital campus. We've had a handful of counselors, and it's just, I think, really amazing and very eye-opening to hear how many different um, you know focuses or specializations people can have in that field. It's so diverse.
mhm.
I know counseling is just a huge, 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 huge
It-
topic world, but it's really interesting to hear the different specializations people have, and so methods, I guess that is. So
mhm.
really need to hear that. So that, as far as that goes, that was an unexpected area for you to kind of become licensed and passionate about.
Mhm.
Correct? Because that was kind of, yeah. So that's always neat to experience being tapped into, and so a place you weren't really aware of, and it's like,
Yeah.
wow, I never knew this about myself.
The opportunity presented itself, and I'm a firm believer that you walk through the door and you learn what you learn. So
Mhm.
I've taken every opportunity, and I think all the different populations I've worked with, both in the church and outside, has given me a very vast and diverse experience to then be able to do what I'm doing now. Because there isn't much that walks through the door that I haven't worked with or seen or helped a client start to process through.
Now, I guess because I've already mentioned, COVID and the year that we've all been in, um, and just wondering, especially with something like substance abuse and addictions in such a, I mean, if you didn't have anxiety before, COVID's gonna,
Give it to you.
untap that, yeah, and tap into that, I mean. And so I was just wondering if you can speak to, if there was any, the impact that COVID had on especially that population, and for you as a counselor, just from your perspective, what's it been like being a counselor in this past year?
Meg, I would say it's been challenging. I to be a counselor in this past year has been no easy feat in any way.
Mm-hmm.
I laugh because I don't think there's any other word, there's no other word to really describe it. But in the same breath, I also want to say it's been an honor at the same time. I have definitely been more stretched, more humbled, more challenged than I've ever been working in this past year. But on the same token, I also believe I've grown as a clinician, as a minister, and as a practitioner more than I ever would have without this situation. So, I mean, this past year has affected everyone tremendously in a variety of ways, right? It's hard for me to specifically say everyone has responded in these categorical ways because it's been such an individualized experience. For those who went into it already with anxiety, this may have set it free. But then on the same token, there's a lot of people who conquered their anxiety prior to this. And this last year was a testament to what true freedom and the miraculous power of Christ can do, because it wasn't overwhelming for them and they walked through it with strength and dignity. But then there was other people that this was really a challenge and they had to lean into their support systems and learn to cope in different ways. So I think, the underlying theme through all of this from my perspective, has been growth. And maybe not always linear growth, but growth, and learning to rise to challenges, learning to be adaptable, learning to get flexible, which, trust me, I hate the word flexible. I hate it. I like things organized. I literally brought my planner so that I would be ready to go, right?
That's great, yeah.
But as a counselor, I've had to learn to be flexible. I've had to learn how to operate and offer services in this capacity. I've never done this before, right? But it's also given us new methods of connection. It's showed us that, really the only thing we can depend on is Christ, because that which will be shaken, right? And learning to find that strength in unexpected ways.
I think that's, real congruent with what we've heard, over the past year with just responses from other counselors in the field that we've had on. It's kind of a mixed bag, but certainly everybody's, people are coming in with, walking through new territory, or territory that, has, resurgence of it. And then you've got the counselors who are walking through this new territory as well. And we kind of all just do it together. We just have to fumble through it together. And like you said, by the grace of God,
we're all figuring it out.
Right? Yeah.
And I think anything, it's been a unifying experience, right? For the counselor and the client, because we're both navigating unprecedented times. And that can be something that bonds us and builds that rapport as we work together towards health.
Yes, that's an interesting perspective as well. Also wondering then, because, I just, on this, you being so young as you are and have achieved so much already educationally, do you have further goals in this field, or maybe something else? I mean, we can venture out a little bit from the counseling, because I know there's other interests that you have, and things you enjoy. So do you have further goals in counseling, or some other goals that you'd like to share with us?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly do. I think, maybe 2 years ago, I was accepted to a PhD program, but it wasn't the right time. That's when my husband came into my life. So I felt that God was giving me an opportunity. So not that that's completely off the table. It's just not something I felt led back to at this point. I think, I would certainly love to teach. That's something that I've always wanted to do, is to teach at the bachelor's level or the master's level. So if that opportunity presented itself, I would certainly walk through that door. That's definitely a goal. But I think my biggest goal right now is more focused on the individual. For a long time, I've been very focused on the next thing, right? I've done a lot in 28 years, and you do that a lot by moving and by not slowing down. And to be honest, Meg, my goal right now is to slow down.
No, I like that goal.
So I am working on being more present. I'm working
Mhm.
on, I believe God has given me this opportunity to start helping and being a resource in the church. And that is something that I'm looking at, as well as being able to offer seminars and different opportunities via Zoom for leadership teams and things of that nature. Because everyone's going to come out of this a little bit different, but the more resources I can
Mhm.
offer, the better. So I think my goals would be more walking through whatever door God opens, but also enjoying the present and being still and finding gratitude in the midst of the change.
And just as some goals are reached by the movement, pressing, 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 some goals are reached in the slowing down. So, that's great. I think it sounds like, just like, you came prepared, organized with your notebook. You've got some organized plans there for your future. And we do wish you, the best in that. And hope you're enjoying the married life and
Yeah.
just settling down. So part of settling, I'm making my own bridge here, connecting, is I want to give you time to talk about this new venture that I saw and shared on my Facebook page this
Oh,
week.
thank you. Thank you.
I did. Your mom had shared it, and I think your sister too. And it is, Chelsey has partnered with a practice in Pennsylvania, counseling practice in Pennsylvania, and she has become their first Delaware branch. And currently, it's telehealth. It's through digitally, specifically right now, but we wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about that, because Chelsey would be able to see clients in the state of Delaware and represent, I believe it's called New Beginnings.
Mhm,
Is that
mhm.
correct?
Yep.
So go ahead and share with us about this new venture. And, it's very, very exciting. So go ahead.
Thank you. So it is ironic that it's called New Beginnings because it's a new beginning for me too.
Yeah.
So yes, I have partnered with New Beginnings. So the colleague that started this practice started it a few years ago, and her and I worked together at a different location a couple of years back, and we've just stayed in touch, and we had bonded during that time over both being Christians.
Mhm.
And so she had reached out to me, I don't know, probably months ago, and I just wasn't ready. I wasn't, but for many, many years since I've gotten this master's degree, I get calls. Hey, are you taking clients? Are you taking clients? And the answer's always been like, I wish I could, but not the time, not the place. I just didn't feel like I was ready for it yet. But this time she called, and I had somebody reach out, and I felt God saying, now's the time to walk through this door. So I prayed about it. I talked to my husband about it, because it doesn't seem like the time to be an entrepreneur, let's be honest. But sometimes God has us walk through the unexpected door at the unexpected time, which proves to be the right moment.
Mhm. And he knows all.
And he knows all, right? Even if it goes against my my calendar, right?
Mhm.
So it is a telehealth practice. So what that means is very similar to how Meg and I are chatting right now. I meet with clients, and it's through an online platform called Simple Practice. I schedule everything myself. I accept insurance. So I often get people would always ask for an apostolic counselor that accepts insurance. Well, here you go, folks. I'm an apostolic counselor and I accept insurance. Okay. So, what that means is that I'm currently credentialed with Blue Cross Blue Shield and Highmark.
Mm.
Okay. So, basically, what that looks like is that I'm a clinician or a practitioner. If you were to call the back of your insurance card where it asks for that number, I would be listed there now. So, I'm working on a couple of their insurances. I also offer cash pay and sliding scale for those who don't have insurance, because we don't want that to be a barrier. Okay. But I offer those services. So that's individual counseling, that's couples counseling and marriage counseling. It really depends. I offer consultations as well. Sometimes people, want to call about something that's going on. So it really just depends. It's a very individualized type of service that I can offer. So I'm currently taking clients, which is exciting. And the spots people are already calling. I've already started. And it's just very, very exciting that this opportunity has presented itself. So I'm glad that God gave me the push, and I'm glad that my husband has been so supportive, and my family has been a tremendous support during this time. But now I get to take that and pour it back into the Delaware community, because we are a small state, but there's a lot of us. And we all have,
Yes, small states. Hey, we need all the services too.
right. The small states get overlooked, right?
Yeah.
The church that I serve with is in PA, but I have been working in Delaware. I went to grad school in Delaware, so it's just made sense for me to get licensed in Delaware. With that in mind, I am in process of getting my license in PA as well. So
Oh, great.
June or July, I'll be able to also serve those in Pennsylvania. But for right now, it's a Delaware practice. So that's what that looks like.
Wonderful. So yes, any questions can be submitted to the, if Erica was able to put her email address in there, and just questions, or, tapping into this brand new branch in Delaware, you may contact Chelsey via that link. And so we have run almost up to 7:30 here. It's 7:27 on my clock. And so, Erica, let us know how, if you have some questions rolling in yet, or if we can chit chat a bit longer. What's it looking like? Okay, we're going to, I had a question when you were talking about, as the questions start coming in, sometimes it takes just a minute. I had a question about your practice, and are you serving families, or can it only be the 16 and above? How does that work?
So it depends on the situation. I'm not offering individualized child therapy at this time.
Okay.
We're just not set up for it. And I've done it in the past, but at this point in my journey, that's just not something that I'm offering. Now, if I have a family coming to work with me and the parents are involved, or whatever that may look like, I can definitely navigate those situations. I am a certified prepare and enrich facilitator. So what that means is that, I can offer premarital counseling, marital counseling. As families are maybe looking at adopting or fostering, there's also a program I can help with that.
Oh, wow.
So there's options for that, but it just kind of depends on the situation. What I will say is I don't get involved in child custody cases. That's something that I usually get. I get that question, I get that call, and that is something that I will turn down. I don't get involved in those.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to know that. I was just thinking about family, and kind of if there's a unit that would want services, but we're under the age of 16.
If the parents are involved, that's fine.
Yes. Okay. I also want to go. Erica said there's a couple rolling in, but I just wanted to ask you about. I have a friend who got a degree in music therapy, and you had mentioned that was maybe one route you would go, and then you went this other route. What about music therapy? Because I know you're a musician and a singer.
Yeah.
And I know your husband as well.
Yeah, he's phenomenal. Yeah, he's great.
Yes. And so I just thought, well, I wonder kind of about the music therapy draw. Was it just because of your musical inclination, or you knew about it? Or tell me more about music therapy.
So I think originally I had thought that would be, I love music. I'm a classically trained pianist. My parents had me in lessons with Darlene. I don't know if someone from a couple people from the Newark church probably know Darlene from age 5. But I grew up playing, and then I played flute and piccolo, and I just play a lot of instruments. So part of it was just, I believe in the power of music. I believe in the power that it has to communicate when words fail, which is ironic because as a therapist, you would think I'm all about the words, but there are some things that sometimes we don't have the words for, that music can be that fostering of a connection. Also, especially for children with trauma, autism, things of that nature, sometimes the words aren't enough and you need something else to connect. So I always believed in the power of music as this, not to use a pun, but instrumental, right, in the power of connection. But with that being said, from a very practical standpoint, it's hard to get a job. That in specifically when I was graduating and looking around a couple of my friends who had done music therapy, they were really struggling where the economy was at that point, because it's a very individualized, specialized program. Insurance doesn't pay for it in a lot of states, and it can be very challenging to get into a hospital to do that. So, just in a very practical answer to your question, as much as I loved it, I wanted to be able to pay the bills, and that realistically would have been challenging.
Yes. Well, yeah, now that I think about it, my friend who has an education in that, she is not working in that field. And so I think you're right that it's a challenging field to find. It's very narrow, you know, and it's, I mean, as far as job opportunities. And
Get the
yeah,
jobs that keep
so
them.
that, yes, yes.
They keep
Oh,
them.
we must have questions.
Sorry, didn't mean to just pop on like that.
Oh,
Okay, so we have a couple. Let's see. Okay, here's one. What is the piece of advice you give them the most often?
the piece of advice I give the most often. That's hard because I feel like it depends on the situation. Most recently, it has been advising the people not just people I'm working with, but everyone to breathe. Over this past year, over everything that's happened, there's been a lot of trauma, vicarious trauma. There's been a lot of stress, anxiety, but also there's been an intense sense of urgency. And I think for so many of us, we've just been running at this heightened, accelerated pace in panic out of survival and out of, the human mechanism to feel like we need to do so. But for a lot of us, we've forgotten, like I said, even in myself, to breathe and to be still and to meditate in the given moment that we're in. So I think most recently, that's been a very common theme of what I've been, telling a lot of people I come into contact with. Breathe, take a breath, meditate. That urgency is internal. It's not coming from anything external. And just because the world is operating at this accelerated pace doesn't mean I need to and doesn't mean you need to. We can breathe and we can wait on God to move versus trying to force things or sticking with the pace that the world is demanding.
Sounds good to me.
We have this one. What advice would you give family members who live with someone who has mental illness?
So I think that's a loaded question. Is it Mariana?
Yes.
Hi, Mariana. One, I think that depends on the mental illness. It's hard for me to speak to that without knowing more about a situation. What I can say is that compassion goes a long way, and understanding that mental illness is that it's an illness. And often, just like there is in other sicknesses, we're not always aware of the full scope of what someone's struggling with. We're not aware of the full scope of what's going on inside somebody's head. So compassion and grace goes a long way, but also self-care goes a long way too. I can't do what I do if I'm not filling my own bucket, right? I tell everybody all the time, and I ask this question. This is something else I ask all the time. How full is your bucket, right? Are you pouring from an empty bucket? Is something draining you? Is something alleviating? Is something taking things from you? And if that's happening, because life does that, and stress does that, and the world does that, and day-to-day laundry unfills my bucket. Let me tell you, I hate laundry, right? But there has to be things that are pouring back into my bucket. Am I engaging in prayer and studying? Am I meditating? Am I getting time outside? Am I spending time with people who fill my bucket? So one of the biggest things I would say, especially for a family, because mental illness is a family, disease, is are we all taking individual time to fill our bucket? Are we all taking time to pray? Are we all taking time to study? Are we all taking time to go for a walk? Are we all doing those things that pour into us so that we can be recharged to face whatever the struggle might be as a supportive unit versus one that's constantly emptying each other's buckets? So that
Erica, can I ask a question before we go to the next one?
Yep, go ahead.
One thing I was thinking about, Chelsey, because I don't think I have thought about this question until now. And maybe it's because we've had several counselors on now and people in that field. And I went to school for criminal justice, and always remembered thinking to myself, law enforcement, public service jobs, people who work in those are often they're the people everybody in a community turns to for help. And I always remember thinking to myself, what's in place for the people at the top? A lion is the top of a food chain. Who does lion turn to? So as in this field, and you were just talking about self-care and, the concept of filling your own bucket, what can you speak to from your professional standpoint where the community, you're serving the community and the community knows to turn to you as that next level of support and help? Where do counselors turn, or in your experience, what have you found helpful to kind of be your outlet as the professional? And in your bio, we know that you're a licensed minister of the United Pentecostal Church as well. Again, it's a position that people turn to, people look to, and you provide care for people. You're the care pastor, in fact. And so it's important to, for us to hear all people in all places, wherever God places us, we all need that support and structure, for ourselves as well. Nobody can, God helps us all, but nobody can say, oh, I'm not in need of, care for myself. So can you speak to that a little bit?
I absolutely can. I think, the answer to that question, Meg, is humility, that nobody is outside the realm of needing help.
Mm-hmm.
And the helpers often need the most help, guys. So don't be convinced that they don't, right?
Amen.
Because when you are pouring into other people all the time, sometimes you forget to have people pour into you, or you get so used to pouring into everybody else, it starts to feel selfish to accept help. And because we feel like, how do I accept help? Because everybody needs it, right? And it can be very hard to say no. It can be very hard to say, I can't handle that. It can be very hard to, maintain that distance. So the things that I have found, if you are in that position where you're helping and serving a lot of people and you're getting drained, right? Because we all get drained. We're all humans here, right? We have limits and we have a capacity to what we can do. I would say the most powerful tool in your arsenal are your boundaries. And for a lot of us, sometimes they're a little bit too fluid. And we have to be strong in our boundaries. We have to be resilient in our boundaries, and we have to know what we can and can't handle, but also what we want to handle and what we don't want to handle. There are some situations that I could get involved in, but I don't, because I know that that's going to tip me over, right? That's going to be the one, like a straw that broke the camel's back or whatever that might be. So in order to continue pouring into other people, sometimes my no has to be no. And maybe that's going somewhere, maybe that's traveling, maybe that's a particular speaking engagement. Maybe, not every opportunity is the right opportunity for right now, because I have to serve the people I'm serving now well. And if something's going to drain me beyond my capacity to do that, I'd rather do a couple things well than a lot of things mediocre. So boundaries is a big factor. You know what? A lot of counselors talk to counselors. Called peer supervision, because it's helpful to have somebody in your corner who's another voice of rationale, saying, hey, are you burned out? Hey, do you need a vacation? Hey, do you need to turn off the phone this weekend and not take any calls? Kind of going back to boundaries, but a lot of counselors talk to other counselors. Having a place of confidence, someone that you can turn to. Also, things that are very practical. I'm a firm believer in taking care of your body, right? A firm believer in that we are a steward of the body we are given. And if we run it ragged, we're going to run it ragged. So we have to be conscientious of what we put into it. Are we taking care? Are we doing nourishing ourselves with nourishing foods? Are we sleeping? That's one thing that's a factor that goes out the window. But operating on very little sleep is very similar to someone who's intoxicated. And sometimes people don't realize that. But someone who drives on no sleep has just as likely statistically to get in an accident as a drunk driver would, and to yield the same results, right? Because we need sleep. We need it to recover.
Oh, I know. I know that. That's something I know.
Yeah, like, we need it.
Yeah,
right?
you're right.
And it's one of those things that we oftentimes will be like, I just won't sleep as much. No. There's certain things that we have to put boundaries in place to make sure that we are maintaining. But also, I think the biggest thing is knowing the limits to burnout. And that's, I think, the biggest barrier is, especially for some of us as helpers, we tend to forget that we burn out too. Because we want to help everybody all the time. That's really why most of us got into this, is because we want to help, we want to serve, we feel called to it, we feel passionate about helping others recover. But sometimes we can do that to the point of where we forget that we have limitations. And that would be where the recognizing and the humility piece comes in, and taking a break. Learning to take a break. When I tell all of my clients, I have a mantra I make them recite, and that is, rest is a requirement, not a reward, because resting is not quitting.
That's a good one.
For so often, for most of us, we make ourselves earn our rest. It's a requirement, not a reward. I don't have to earn rest. I need it in order to keep going. So something to think about there.
Yeah, I love that. Really, I always tell people Jesus and boundaries are the best thing that ever happened to me.
Boundaries are key. They are key. I've done entire seminars on boundaries, literally.
Yes. Very good. Wise words there. Thank you. So many good things in there to think about, but also think about if we're applying them, in our lives, because knowledge is one thing, but you got to follow through with application to see any type of result.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. All right, Erica, let's pick up with that. Anything, what's next?
Do you ever pray with your clients?
So, Ruth, it depends on the situation. I have not always worked in a Christian capacity. So there have been situations where I worked in a very secular environment, and a lot of my clients weren't Christian. So I would give them advice or give them feedback out of my Christian morality or my Christian value system, because the principles work whether you're Christian or not. Because that is a firm part of my value system as a counselor, is that I operate on a Christian belief system. So I would say, yes, there have been clients that I pray with, of course. Have I prayed with every client? No, because I'm not at liberty to, having worked in mental health hospitals and things of that nature. But if the opportunity presents itself and a client does want to pray, of course, I would be glad to do that, because spirituality is proven to be a huge factor in recovery. So, the science even backs up that spirituality, when incorporated into recovery, the recidivism rate, or that's a fancy term for people falling back into their old ways, is a lot lower.
Wow. That's really interesting to hear. I mean, it makes sense, but.
Have you considered getting licensed in Maryland?
In Maryland. This was brought up to me a couple of days ago, actually. I'm not sure. So the way that the law currently works is that you're licensed in an individual state. So although my degree works in every state, the way that the law is written, you have to go through an individualized process. And then if you want to be licensed in multiple states, you apply for what's called reciprocity, which is what I'm doing with Pennsylvania. Now, Maryland has a whole set of laws all their own. So there is a movement now where they're working to states to band together and to allow counselors to work in like a group of states, which would be wonderful, because we all know in this area we live, I mean, I can be to PA in 3 minutes, Jersey in 5, and, Maryland in 10. So it would make logical sense that they, extend our licenses. And for a while during the pandemic, they did during an emergency order. So I actually was able to treat people outside of the state, but that has been rescinded in the past couple of months. So it's not off the table. Is it my immediate goal? I'm working on PA first. And then from there, I'll kind of cross that bridge, but I think one state at a time. Now, what I can say is once I open a physical location, if clients are willing to come to me, it won't matter what state they live in. Telehealth is what has these physical restrictions. So once I have a physical office and once that's up and running, which is in the future, clients can drive to me from other states as long as they're meeting with me in my state.
Okay, that's good to know.
Okay. How can the church, individual members and as an institution, destigmatize the need for mental health?
That's a big one, right? I would say the first way is by people being brave enough to be counselors. There aren't many doing what I do, as a woman, as a licensed minister, and as a counselor. I'm kind of a rarity, right? There's a few. Cindy Miller has kind of been the trailblazer, who I respect greatly, and she has done tremendous work. But I would say the first piece is recognizing that this is a need within the church, right? For a lot of generations prior, this wasn't talked about. It was kind of this thing that people dealt with in the quiet or people dealt with in their homes, but it wasn't brought to light. So for a long time, people struggled in the quiet. So it is going to take brave individuals saying, this needs to be talked about, and I'm going to get the education to do it, because it is allowed to education. I was in school for a long time, guys, but it was worth it. Absolutely, hands down worth it. I did a course with Urshan as well. So I've done quite a few different things to really round my education altogether. But I would say, one, people moving in that direction, whether it's a counselor, whether it's a social worker, there's nurses who are mental health trained. There's a lot of different ways to approach this, right? But then also leadership getting trained in these things and recognizing when a counselor needs to be brought in is a big factor, right? Like, going back to boundaries, there's a lot of times that, I've had ministers reach out to me and say, Chelsey, I know my limits. I'm not trained for this. I need help. And that is honestly the biggest step that I see that leads to connection and freedom. Because I'm a complete and utter advocate for prayer. Prayer works. I'm a complete and utter advocate for, going to your pastor and for seeking the leadership and working with your family. But as a professional, sometimes a professional helps facilitate some of those things. So not that my job takes away from it, I'm just an added tool in the toolkit. And I think sometimes people get scared of the counseling type of, what are they going to say? What are they going to do? But if you see it more from that capacity, then I'm just an extra tool that adds to the support system and adds to the team. It really opens up that conversation.
Yes, very good.
Do you have people that you looked up to and or people who encouraged you the most through your life and profession?
Absolutely. Now, professionally, I didn't know counselors. I did connect with Dr. Miller later on in life, but not when I was first getting into this. I would say the people that I looked up to the most were my parents. I, like Meg shared, we were a church plant. We were small. We were a daughter work, and we were a close family. I have an older sister, Corey, who some of you may know. She's awesome. But I have a tremendous, tremendous support system. But for a long time, it was just the four of us against the world. Well, us and God, right? And God got us through a lot of things. But in the face of starting a church in this area is no easy feat. It's challenging. It breaks you. It humbles you. It hurts. There's a lot of challenges that come with it. But in the face of all that, there's tremendous opportunity as well, right? I think so. There's a balance, right? God yields the fruit, but there's also a lot of challenge that comes with leadership and planting something new in an area that isn't that open to this. And watching, what my parents went through years of Bible studies and through years of planning a church and through years of pouring into people and seeing healings take place, but also seeing the hurt that occurred at the same time, I saw a tremendous strength. And I realized that there needed to be more people doing that. And maybe my ministry wouldn't look exactly like theirs, but I could see that I could birth a ministry out of that. So, both my parents worked full time while starting a church. They sacrificed tremendously. My dad used to travel for days and come back and do Bible study and all of these things. And they did it large part on their own. And I always tremendously admired that because it wasn't easy. But to see, two people be so unwavering in the face of so much pain, it just seemed like there was no other option for me but to go out and try and help others heal from the pain too.
I love your parents. I love your sister too. I think I know you the least, but I love them. So
I'm the youngest, so most of the time people don't know me as well.
yeah, I was gonna say our paths didn't cross as much, but yeah, your mom was a sweetheart.
Probably because I was in school. My path didn't cross with anybody because I was in school for 16 years. So people are always like, "Oh, Chelsea's back." I'm like, "Yeah, I'm back." All right.
You're all wonderful.
Since divorce can be traumatic for teens, why are you so definite about not working with custody cases?
So divorce is tremendously traumatic for teens. I do have to agree with you there. In working in custody cases, most of that is about knowing my limitations. It's not something I've specialized in. It's not something I've done a great deal of training in. And as a counselor, one of our biggest attributes is knowing where we're not the right fit. And I'm not the right fit in that area. There are tremendous counselors who are incredibly qualified, who have done tremendous amounts of training, tremendous amounts of study and research into this, and who are absolutely a better fit in that scenario than I might be. So I think, sometimes when someone's a counselor, they bite off more than they can chew. And my oath has been to do no harm and to always do right by every single client. And sometimes the right thing to do is to refer them to someone who's more qualified than me. So that would be my perspective on that. Not that I can't help, but that there's a better fit, and I'm humble enough to admit that.
Do you feel Winnie the Pooh and Piglet have failed ER as a friend?
Absolutely not. He had a great support system. As a kid, he seemed sad, and I couldn't understand why. And it was just, even as a kid, I always felt that everybody wanted a friend, and everybody needed somebody who picked them up when they got sad. So I used to carry Eeyore around and pick him up and take him places. But everybody needs a friend, right?
That's right.
Even my stuffed Eeyore.
How do you think our criminal justice system and our mental health system could be working together better?
So I think that's a tough question because it depends on the state, right? A lot of our criminal justice system and mental health systems that are set up at this point are state-based. The federal government has some involvement, but a lot of that is really your local communities. Now, in Delaware, they somewhat work together, but we don't have a ton of resources in our state, specifically for mental health, right? For recovery, especially for those who struggle with addiction, because we're a smaller state, there hasn't been a lot invested in our state. There hasn't been a lot of programs. There hasn't been a lot of places coming and opening. Now, recently in the past 6 months, there has. And if you keep looking around, I guarantee you will see more because I know of places that are coming to open. So you're going to start seeing some bigger programs that are coming down the pike, which is great because we need those resources. So I think a big factor has been because we are a smaller state, that has not been invested in the same way. But you tend to have different trainings from a criminal justice perspective and a mental health perspective. Now, Meg, I don't want to speak for someone from a criminal justice perspective, but in my training and those I worked with in criminal justice system, we were trained in 2 different ways and with 2 different modalities and 2 different approaches. So I think sometimes it's more just from a perspective approach that those 2 things clash. And I would say it goes back to the education system, teaching those 2 communities to come from a unified approach versus seeing each other in a villainized way. So I think it should be maybe addressed earlier on versus waiting until we get people into a system and they're already operating on something they've been told. Let's address it at the bachelor's level when people are preparing to work in the field in the first place.
And one thing, I'm not going to, chime in too much, but one thing, Chelsey, I was a believer in through my education, which was kind of a long time ago now, but was restorative justice, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it did, it's not very popular and it's not been implemented nationwide on a very major scale, but it did take into consideration bringing in a moderator, to instigate healing and reconciliation and things like that between offender and the person they've, performed a crime on. And so, there's things out there that kind of marry the two, but you're right. That's not the popular approach to the criminal justice system, but it's the one I believed in.
I've been trained in that as well. I'm a big fan of that. I believe it teaches forgiveness and redemption is a huge part of this, but that is not the primary one.
It's not mainstream, correct?
It's not at all. A lot of times you have that conversation and people don't even know what it is, right?
No, right,
so
right.
To me, that goes back to the education piece. We should be teaching that in both mental health, psychology programs and criminal justice. Let's start, educating on restorative justice right from the get-go, so we're entering in with the grace and mercy mentality versus a judgment mentality.
This is the last one. How do you handle a situation when the client is in denial of their mental illness?
So this is more common. Well, it's actually very common, right? Because for a lot of us, we know something is wrong, but we don't entirely know what. So the biggest thing usually with this type of situation is I meet somebody where they're at. A lot of times people come to counseling because they want to be validated, they want to be heard, they want to be seen. But I think sometimes people come in with this expectation that I'm going to sit here and give them all the answers. It's not my job. It's not my job, right? If people are coming to counseling with that expectation, they're going to be disappointed, because my job is to help facilitate someone else to arrive at the answers through their own discovery, through their own digging, through their own internal and external work. I'm the facilitator. I'm the partner. I walk alongside. I'm not the pilot. So often, someone not totally knowing they have something going on, they came to counseling for a reason. So they know something is going on, but maybe they're not aware to the full extent of what it is. I meet them where they're at. I ask challenging questions, and we learn how they can come to that understanding on terms that are acceptable to them. One of the biggest things, that I see that works, and I've been doing this a little while now, is I can tell somebody something and it goes in one ear and out the other. But if they learn it and discover it themselves, and I am there to witness that and remind them of what they did, that's something that inspires change. That's something that someone will hold on to, because people tell us stuff all the time and we all listen. So most of the time, people will buy into something and will change when they actually did the work to find it, when they actually dug deep, when they studied God's word, when they started really asking tough questions, when they started facing their fear head on, feeling the fear and doing it anyway. That's when the change starts to happen. So denial can be incredibly hard, especially for a family. I think about this a lot with addiction, right? Denial is a huge part of addiction. So if a family, that's a lot of why families call me. They just won't admit they're addicted. They just won't admit they have a problem with alcohol. They just won't admit they have a problem with drugs. They just won't admit they have a problem with gambling or porn or whatever it might be. And they want me to go in and tell the person. That doesn't work. The person just tells me to get out. But what I can do is figure out how that is affecting the person's life, and how we can equip them to cope better, and how we can equip them to grow. And if they come to that realization themselves, they'll want to change. So it's about that ownership piece. So I think in those situations, it's being supportive, it's being challenging, but it's also reminding and remembering my own boundaries, that I can't make someone recognize something they don't want to recognize, but I can support them when they do.
I think that's a really wonderful note to end on, because, that's true across a lot of things in life. You can't make anyone, but you can support them along their journey, and whatever that is. And so we're right at the 8 o'clock time. So look at that. You're a prompt person. We ended promptly at 8. This is wonderful. But we really appreciate you coming on and sharing with us all about your counseling journey and also the new exciting venture of the branch in Delaware, because for our New York UPC listeners or anyone local, this is something that you can actually benefit from or tap into, which our other counselors we've had on, that's not been the case. So that's really exciting, and we'll be supporting you with our prayers and just wish you the best in that venture. And so with that, I want to remind our listeners that we are on 6 nights a week at 7 p.m. We broadcast Tuesdays through Sundays. And so we'll be right back here, same place, same time, tomorrow night at 7 p.m. For our Saturday night message. So we'll see you all then. And thanks again, Chelsey, and everybody have a great night.
Thank you so much.